Hi, my name's Malus, and I buried my brother while my family smiled like they'd won something. At his wake, my grandmother collapsed on top of his coffin after whispering my name, like it was some kind of confession. Then, his watch buzzed on my wrist with a message: Trust no one. I didn't know what it meant then. I thought maybe grief was playing tricks on me. But what if that message wasn't the beginning of my madness, but the end of their cover-up? They erased his truth, rewrote mine, and made sure I was the last one to realize that my family wasn't grieving. They were orchestrating. Why did my brother leave that message for me? And why did my mother make sure no one ever heard his side of the story? The funeral home smelled like polished wood and wilted carnations, an odd combination of reverence and neglect, the kind of scent that never quite leaves your clothes or your memory. Outside, gray clouds hung low over Spokane, the kind that pressed on your skin, not just your shoulders. I stood near the front, not because I wanted to be seen, but because it was the only place I could breathe. Silas looked nothing like himself in the casket. They'd styled his hair wrong, made him look like some corporate model. Not the brother I remembered, the one who wore mismatched socks and had a permanent smudge of ink on his right thumb from scribbling ideas at 3 a.m. I kept waiting for him to sit up and crack a joke about the bad tie they put on him. He didn't. The room buzzed with whispers, not mourning, not shock, just whispers. My mother, Vera, greeted guests like she was hosting a benefit gala. Her lips curved into that practiced smile, the one she used when she was raising funds or explaining away Silas's mood swings to colleagues. My cousins stood in clusters, nodding solemnly like they were checking off a to-do list. Then there was Grandma Eunice, 87, cane in hand, wrapped in that same faded lavender shawl she wore every winter since I was a child. She shuffled past me, stopped at the edge of the casket, and rested a trembling hand on the edge. Her knuckles were pale, taut with something beyond grief. She leaned down. Her lips moved. I stepped closer, just enough to catch it. Malus, forgive me. Her voice was more breath than sound. Then, she collapsed. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped the hardwood floor as guests rushed forward. Vera yelled for someone to call 911. I didn't move. I just stared at the spot where Grandma had stood seconds earlier. That wasn't a goodbye. That was a confession. Medics arrived quickly, loaded Eunice onto a stretcher. Vera fussed over appearances, smoothing her dress, offering smiles, calming guests like nothing truly disruptive had happened. As if the body of a frail woman hitting the floor beside her dead grandson was merely an unfortunate footnote. As the chaos settled into an uneasy murmur, I felt a vibration against my wrist. The watch, Silas's watch. He gave it to me 3 weeks before his death, slipping it onto my arm without much ceremony. Just in case you ever need to know the truth, he'd said, half smiling. At the time, I thought it was a sentimental gesture. Now I wasn't so sure. I glanced at the face. A message had appeared. Trust no one. My pulse leapt into my throat. I tapped the screen, expecting it to disappear. Maybe some kind of memory function, a glitch, anything. But it stayed there, stark against the minimalist display. Bold. Certain. I looked around. No one had noticed. Everyone was too focused on Grandma or themselves. I lowered my arm, pulled my sleeve down. Keep it together, I told myself. I wasn't about to be labeled the unstable one. Not today. Later, over lukewarm coffee in the reception hall, I watched my family. Vera floated from group to group, always smiling, always in control. My Aunt Nora whispered with 2 of the lawyers, glancing toward me more than once. My older cousin Beck, now apparently in charge of handling the estate, kept trying to corner me with questions I refused to answer. I walked over to Vera, demanding, clarity. Can we talk? She sipped from her cup, not looking up. Now's not the time for drama, Malus. It's not drama if it's true. Her eyes finally met mine. There are plenty of truths. Only a few are useful. I bit back the reply burning on my tongue. This wasn't the moment. But it would come. After slipping outside, I sat on the low stone wall behind the building. The air had turned sharper, wind slicing through my coat. I thought about Silas, How he'd defended me against the constant criticism, the way he'd called me the heart of this family, even when no one else could see it. He always saw it. I pulled the sleeve back again, staring at the watch. It was still there. The message hadn't vanished. Trust no one. I thought back to the last time we spoke. Silas had seemed distracted, almost paranoid, but when I asked, he'd laughed it off. "You'll understand soon enough," he'd said. Now I wasn't sure I wanted to understand at all. That night, I lay awake in my apartment. The shadows cast by the streetlights looked longer than usual, stretched and silent. I placed the watch on my nightstand, plugged it in. The battery blinked, then a new icon appeared, one I'd never seen before. Memo Vault. Unlock? My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath caught, and then I tapped it. The morning after the wake, the Grayson estate was already dressed like nothing had ever happened. Fresh-cut peonies stood stiff in crystal vases, and the long dining table was lined with pristine white china. Every place setting precise like a funeral had never touched this house. Vera called it a family brunch, but no one was really eating. People picked at eggs and toast, sipping lukewarm coffee, pretending to care. I watched them all from my seat at the far end of the table, cousins with curated sympathy, uncles chuckling too loud, aunts commenting on the weather like grief was just a passing inconvenience. The room was colder than the fog outside. When Vera finally stood up to make her usual thinly veiled remarks, her voice cut through the murmurs. "We gather today, not just to remember Silas, but to honor the strength of this family." That word, strength, landed heavy on my chest. After the dishes were cleared and people began drifting into smaller cliques, I approached her. She stood near the fireplace, arms folded, inspecting a portrait like it might judge her. "Did Grandma say anything to you before she collapsed?" I asked quietly. She didn't even blink. "No, why would she?" I hesitated. "She said my name. She looked scared." Vera's expression didn't waver. We don't spiral over one woman's delusion, especially when she was already losing her mind. I took a breath, stepped closer. "And the watch? Silas's watch. You know the one he gave me. It buzzed yesterday. There was a message." She leaned in, so close I could smell the peppermint on her breath. "Not today," she whispered. "You don't want to embarrass yourself." It wasn't anger. It was control, cold, sharp, and effortless. That was Vera's specialty, making you question your own reality while she rewrote it in front of you. Later that afternoon, she summoned everyone to the study. Mahogany walls, leather-bound books no one ever read, a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years, it all reeked of curated heritage. We stood in silence as a manila folder was passed from person to person. Inside, the distribution of Silas's belongings. Isolda, his ex-wife, had declined her share. Everything else went to Vera. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years muttered, "Guess you were more of a guest than a sibling, huh?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had closed around something bitter. Vera didn't look at me when she closed the folder. "Let's not make this about sentiments," she said smoothly. "Silas was complicated. We're just making sure everything is resolved." Resolved, like a math problem, like I didn't even count. I wandered the house after that, observing the dynamics like a stranger at a dinner party. Everyone played their roles. Some nodded along with Vera's stories. Others laughed too easily. One of my uncles tried to joke about how intense Silas could be. Only Aunt Linda gave me a fleeting, sorrowful look. But she didn't speak up either. I started jotting notes in my phone. Who said what, who didn't. Not because I was paranoid. Because I'd finally learned that silence in this family was a form of strategy. Later, in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed with the watch still tight on my wrist. I ran my fingers along its face, remembering how Silas had given it to me the night of my 28th birthday. That night, Vera had hosted a fundraiser and told me it was an efficient double use of time. I blew out candles alone in the kitchen, while Silas handed me the box with the watch inside. "You're the only one here not pretending," he'd said. "One day, this might matter." I didn't get it then, but I did now. I opened the closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and started packing. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to hand me closure. I didn't want their cars or jewelry or hollow condolences. I wanted the truth. I wanted what they were hiding. As dusk settled, I slipped out through the side entrance, avoiding goodbyes. The estate loomed behind me like a museum I'd finally outgrown. Back at my apartment, I tossed my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and sat at my desk. The watch's battery had drained, but as soon as I connected it to the charger, the screen lit up. A new alert blinked at the top. Audio file, last entry, access now. My fingers hovered above the screen. I felt a pulse behind my eyes. Whatever was inside this file, Silas had meant for me to find it. I clicked play. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, its creaky frame still covered in the same pale blue quilt I had as a teenager. The air in the room hadn't changed. Dusty, a little sweet with old perfume residue in the curtains, and full of the kind of quiet that only thickens over time. The house felt smaller now, more like a museum of someone else's memories than a place I ever belonged to. The watch blinked softly on my wrist as I connected it to my laptop. The Memo Vault app loaded almost instantly, smoother than I expected. A single folder appeared. Final entry. My pulse climbed as I clicked it open. Inside were 3 encrypted files, 1 audio clip, and a string of file names that immediately rang familiar. Timestamps, all dates that meant something. Silas's resignation from the foundation, the night he texted me, "Trust your instincts," even the date of Grandma's fall. I hesitated, then pressed play. His voice cracked through the speakers, tired, but steady. "If you're hearing this, something went wrong." I covered my mouth. I wasn't ready. I didn't think I'd ever hear him again. "They won't come after you yet, but they will, especially if they know you've got this. Don't confront Mom. She'll make it look like you're unraveling. That's her power. Smile. Play dumb. But record everything. They erased more than you know." I paused the file. Just for a moment. Hearing him like that made something rise in my chest. Grief, yes, but also a rising need to know what he saw, what he feared. I let the rest play. He didn't name names, but he didn't need to. "They changed the quote," he said, "told me it was too provocative. I asked them to put it on my headstone. Family isn't blood, it's truth." I snapped the laptop shut. That quote wasn't anywhere in the program. At the service, the card handed out to guests said, "He lived with integrity and served with love." Some sanitized garbage probably cooked up by Vera's PR team. That quote meant nothing, not like the one he wanted. Even dead, she edited him. I opened Silas's old cloud drive. He'd once shared a folder with me years ago, back when we were closer. It had dozens of photos from our childhood. Trips to Lake Coeur d'Alene, our first Halloween together, snow forts in the backyard. But now, as I scrolled, I noticed something strange. Every picture with just the two of us, gone. There were still family photos, group shots, ones where Vera beamed front and center, but our sibling moments had been scrubbed, deliberately. I almost slammed the laptop shut again. But then I saw it, another folder, hidden under a different name. "They can't delete us." Inside, every missing photo, labeled, dated, even captioned. I stared at one. It was Silas and me on the swings at Uncle Lou's ranch, dirt on our knees, faces red from laughing too hard. Underneath, in Silas's handwriting, "This is the real family." I downloaded everything. Twice. Then backed it up to 2 USBs. I printed out the files, opened a corkboard, thumbtacked the quote at the top. "Not forgotten." They didn't just erase him, they erased me too. I remembered what Vera told me once when I questioned why I wasn't invited to a donor dinner. "You were always meant to orbit, not anchor." Back then, I thought it was some poetic jab. Now, it felt like a mission statement. That evening, I cleared my dining table and spread out every piece of evidence I had: emails, text backups, photos, screenshots. I opened an old notepad and began documenting connections: who knew what, who stood to benefit, who had vanished into the background when things got loud. Each line I drew made my intent sharper. Each photo reminded me this wasn't just about Silas, it was about everything they tried to wipe away. Hours passed before I realized the sun had set. The room was lit only by my laptop and the soft hum of the refrigerator. As I prepared to shut down for the night, I opened one last file, unnamed, half-corrupted. The screen glitched, static lines distorting half the image, but the audio remained. A nighttime meeting, Silas's voice, muffled but anxious. "I didn't come here to play games," he said. "If we're doing this, I want to see her face." The camera adjusted. A car door opened. A figure stepped out, head turned slightly. It froze, then cut out. Just before the file ended, a license plate blinked into view for a split second. V3R4GX Vera's vanity plate. It took me longer than I'd admit to press play. Even after everything, the watch, the funeral, Grandma's final whisper, I still hesitated, sitting in the dim light of my apartment with the words, "Last Entry," glowing like a dare on the memo vault screen. Silas's voice was a ghost in my memory. I didn't know what it would do to me to hear it again, but I tapped play anyway. "If Mom tells you it was an accident, don't believe her." I stopped breathing. "I tried to leave. I really did," he continued. "But I didn't get far. Someone was always watching. She didn't say it directly, of course, not her style. But the message was clear. Stay silent. Stay safe. Leave and, well." The file clicked slightly. He must have shifted in his chair. "I'm sorry, Malis. I should have told you sooner. I left more. A backup, just in case. You'll find it eventually. A storage unit, under my old gym membership name. I couldn't carry everything. I left the rest in the shadows." Then silence. "And finally, start with Vera, and if you can't trust her, you know what you have to do." The recording ended, but something in me didn't. I rewound and listened again, every inflection, every pause. His fear was real, controlled. He wasn't rambling, he was documenting. I clicked through the file's metadata. Date created, 3 days before his hiking accident. He knew something was coming. I opened another file, labeled Backup TXT, and noticed something odd in its encryption tag. The software used wasn't anything public. It was a proprietary tool from Grayson Innovations, our mother's company. I blinked. Checked again. She had encrypted the files. Silas had trusted her. With his data. With everything. And she'd locked it behind tech I wasn't even supposed to have access to. The betrayal wasn't distant or symbolic anymore. It was personal. Strategic. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling, trying not to scream. My mind looped back 6 months, to that night Silas came home from Denver. He was pale, unusually quiet, then exploded into an argument with Vera in the kitchen. Doors were slammed, voices raised. I'd asked him afterward what that was about. "Be careful what you ask her," he'd said. "Some things don't come with answers, only consequences." Back then, I assumed it was just another family spat. Now I knew better. She hadn't just dismissed him. She'd sabotaged him. She made sure no one else would ever hear his truth. The idea that my own mother could sit across from me, drink her morning coffee, and simultaneously coordinate the burial of my brother's life, his voice, his legacy, made something inside me snap. I opened a secure email window and attached the audio file. I didn't send it to anyone local. I sent it to an old law school friend who owed me more than a few favors. I didn't explain much, just wrote, "Hold this, in case I disappear." Then I got up, walked to my front door, and changed every lock. I turned off location tracking, logged out of every shared calendar, wiped my devices. If Vera wanted me quiet, she'd have to work harder. She taught me to be invisible. Now she'd regret it. By nightfall, I felt calmer. Still rattled, yes, but focused. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the dining table, flipping through what was left of Silas's encrypted files. Most were broken fragments, code strings I couldn't decode. But then a knock sounded at my door. I froze. No one knew I was here. Not tonight. Not now. I didn't open it. 15 minutes passed. When I finally cracked the door, a small brown envelope sat on the mat. No return address. No name. I brought it inside, heart racing, peeled the flap open slowly. Inside was a manila folder, a copy of an accident report, not the one our family lawyer had shown me. This one had red ink, stamps, and a bold title across the top. Confidential, internal review only. The envelope was thick, slightly creased, and sealed without a return address, same as before. But this time, it felt heavier, not in weight, in intention. I peeled it open on my kitchen counter, the same place I used to open birthday cards from Silas, back when he still had that smirk and believed surprises could be good. Inside was a crisp insurance policy. $2 million. Beneficiary, Vera Grayson. Date modified, exactly 7 days before Silas died. Attached to it was a sticky note in unfamiliar handwriting. He didn't even want insurance. No signature, just the silence of someone who clearly wanted me to know but didn't want to be caught knowing. I gripped the counter. The edges of the paper curled under my fingers. I texted Marcus, a friend who worked at a bank branch just outside the city. He agreed to meet me after hours. "Let me guess," he said as I handed over the policy. "Family mess? Just tell me what you see." He leaned back, skimming it. His eyebrows lifted. "Yeah, this was paid out already. Lump sum. Transferred into a new trust, one I haven't seen before. Created 5 days after the death certificate was filed. Beneficiary, your mother." No mention of Silas's previous will? He shook his head. If he had one, it wasn't used. I didn't thank him. I couldn't. I just stared down at the glossy countertop like it might blink a different answer if I waited long enough. That night, I drove to the Grayson estate. Vera was in the garden, trimming roses like she hadn't just inherited blood money. I watched her for a full minute before speaking. "He never would have left you that money." She didn't look up, just snipped another stem, casually, like my voice was background noise. "He didn't," she said, finally. "I earned it. Keeping this family from imploding has a cost, Melis. One I've paid for years." I stepped closer. "You think manipulation is currency?" She turned then, eyes flat. "You think emotional chaos builds legacies? I built this name, not Silas, not you." I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reply. I left, but I didn't go far. The next morning, under the pretense of asking about Grandma's estate, I visited her lawyer, a sharp man with thinning hair and eyes too tired for pretense. After some hesitation, he unlocked a drawer and handed me a letter. "Your grandmother instructed this to be delivered to you after the funeral, but—" He paused. "Your mother intervened, claimed Eunice's cognition was declining." I opened it with trembling hands. The writing was shaky but unmistakable. Silas feared her. So do I. My hands curled around the page as if I could squeeze out the truth hiding between the lines. Eunice had known. She'd tried to warn me, and Vera had silenced her too. Later that week, Vera hosted what she called a unity dinner. The family gathered in the dining room, people who hadn't spoken in years suddenly pretending we all belonged to the same chapter of a story. I brought the letter and the policy, placed them on the table. Silence. Then, from across the room, a cousin, one who'd always clung to neutrality, asked, "Is that true?" Vera didn't flinch. She rose, glass in hand. "Families built on resentment die in public. Ours will not." I stood too, not to toast, to end it. "If silence is what keeps this family together," I said, voice even, "then maybe it shouldn't exist at all." I walked out. The chairs behind me didn't move. No one followed. Back at my apartment, still wearing the same dress from dinner, I sat on the edge of my bed when the email arrived. Subject: not everything was destroyed. Start with the basement. There was a single attachment, a map of the estate, a blinking red dot under the west wing. I waited until midnight. By then, the estate had gone dark, save for the dim porch light Vera kept on like it was some kind of lighthouse for her own ego. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way on foot, taking the gravel path behind the old greenhouse, just like I had as a kid sneaking out for late-night snacks. The key still worked. I hadn't expected it to, but there it was, turning smoothly in the lock of the side service door. I eased it open and slipped inside, swallowed by the sterile stillness of the West Wing hallway. The house felt tighter now, like it had shrunk around its secrets. As I moved through the corridor, the familiar smell of waxed floors and lavender-scented polish clung to my memories. The West Wing had been off limits growing up, converted into offices and storage after Vera declared family needed structure. I had learned early on that structure meant silence, control. I crept down the stairs toward the basement. It was colder down there. Not just in temperature, something heavier clung to the walls. The lights flickered when I pulled the chain. I paused, letting my eyes adjust, then stepped forward onto the concrete floor. That map had marked a spot beneath the old wine racks, right near the east wall. I ran my foot slowly along the wooden floor slats, then heard it, an unmistakable hollow creak beneath my heel. I knelt, tugged at the edges. The board gave way. Beneath it was a small metal box, its surface scratched and dusty. I pried it open and immediately felt the air shift. Inside lay my old locket, the same one Silas had given me when I turned 25. I thought I'd lost it years ago, and yet here it was, tucked away under layers of lies. I clicked it open. A micro USB was wedged inside. Back at my apartment, I didn't even take off my coat. I plugged the USB into my laptop and held my breath. A folder popped up. Watch me burn. I opened it. There were dozens of files. Video footage, emails, scanned documents, some labeled, others not. My hands trembled as I clicked on a video. It opened with Silas, sitting in a car. He looked exhausted, unshaven, but defiant. "If you're seeing this," he said, "it means they got to me before I could finish what I started." He paused, looked over his shoulder, then leaned in. "They've been collecting stories, patterns, obedience testing. The ones who didn't comply vanished." I couldn't breathe. He scrolled through a series of images. People I didn't recognize. Some were circled, others crossed out. They promised discretion, but I found footage, evidence they monitored not just subjects, but family. The background audio shifted, static. Then something else. A woman's voice. Familiar. I turned up the volume. "You shouldn't have involved her," the voice said. "She was manageable until you gave her the watch." My blood ran cold. I checked the file's metadata. Coordinates. Device IDs. Then it hit me. Some of the footage was from my own apartment, angles only someone inside would know. One clip showed me reading on the couch, another brushing my teeth. I slammed the laptop shut and tore through my apartment. Behind the curtains, inside the vents. I didn't know what I was looking for until I saw it. A tiny glint above the light fixture. I grabbed a chair and twisted the cover off. There it was, a black pinhole camera. I backed down, heart racing. This wasn't just about Silas anymore. I was a subject, an asset. An email drafted itself in my head. I sent the folder, every file, to my law school friend in Portland. I called and left a message. "If I don't check in within 48 hours, leak everything." Then I sat on the floor. Let the silence roll over me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. One last file blinked open on my screen. Asset transfer. Confidential. I opened it. A contract. Medical jargon. Data streams. Behavioral indexes. One line made my mouth go dry. Subject, Malis Grayson. Classification, Observational Compliance Protocol. There it was, in black and white. They hadn't just watched me. They'd categorized me. I scrolled to the bottom of the file and nearly dropped the laptop. Digital approval, Cressida Grayson. My aunt, not Vera. I was still staring at the screen when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We need to talk. I'm not the enemy." The diner off Route 2 was the kind of place people stopped at on long drives when silence felt safer than conversation. Booths with cracked red vinyl, napkin dispensers full but dusty, and a waitress who didn't ask questions. It was the perfect place for secrets. My phone buzzed again. "I'm in the last booth." I scanned the room. Only one person fit the tone of that message. Cressida, my aunt. My mother's older sister. She looked older than I remembered. Not fragile, but worn, like someone who'd carried too much for too long and finally sat down to admit it. She gestured for me to sit, slid a cup of coffee across the table, and didn't speak for a full minute. "I tried to warn Silas," she finally said. "He thought he was untouchable." "Why now?" I asked. "Why me?" Her eyes didn't blink. "Because now it's too late for him, and almost too late for you." She slid a small brass key across the table. A tag dangled from it, handwritten in pen. East Room 3B. Back at the estate that evening, I parked down the road again, this time in the shadows of tall cedar trees. The key trembled in my hand, not from fear, but from a growing understanding that what lay behind that door could redefine everything. Room 3B used to be Silas's space before it was converted by Vera. It now served as a storage room, or so I'd been told for years. When I reached it, the lock had been changed. Recently, I crouched, took a hairpin from my back pocket, and picked it open like Silas taught me when we were teenagers breaking into the liquor cabinet. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Dust clung to the air. White sheets draped over furniture, and the shelves were eerily bare. But I didn't come this far for a museum. I moved toward the far wall and ran my fingers along the baseboard until I found it, slightly raised, almost imperceptibly. Behind the panel, wrapped in thick plastic and masking tape, was an envelope. Inside was a copy of an autopsy report. And not the one the family had received. This one had markings in red, notes I'd never seen. It was stamped preliminary, internal use only. Under cause of death, a single line hit me like a punch. Blunt force trauma to the occipital region. Inconsistent with expected fall pattern. Further analysis recommended. Silas didn't slip. He didn't stumble off a cliff. He was hit. And someone made sure that version never left the drawer. I folded the document and tucked it into my coat, heart pounding in a rhythm that made my hands shake. I knew what I had to do. Sunday brunch was tradition at the Grayson estate, an unspoken ritual of power maintenance more than connection. I showed up unannounced, walked straight into the dining room where Vera sat flanked by her loyal few. I pulled out the report and laid it flat in the center of the table. "This is the real autopsy," I said. "It says he didn't fall. He was struck." No one moved. Vera didn't blink. She sipped her tea slowly, set the cup down. "You know what's dangerous, Malis?" she said. "A girl who thinks being loud makes her right." Then she stood, smoothed her blouse, and walked out. No one followed her. For a moment, it was just the sound of cutlery clinking faintly, like a machine still running even after the operator has left. I looked at my cousins, aunts, anyone willing to meet my eyes. "If any of you want to pretend you didn't hear this, that's your choice, but don't call it love." That night, I recorded a video. I listed every document, every file, every time Vera or anyone else twisted the truth. I uploaded it to a secure cloud and set it to release in 72 hours if I didn't manually cancel it. "If anything happens to me," I said to the camera, "they did it." The next morning, I drove home in silence. The roads were slick with early autumn rain, and I kept checking my mirrors. I didn't even know what I was looking for until I saw it. A black SUV. No plates. Too close. I slowed, turned. It stayed with me. Then, as I rounded the corner near the ridge above my apartment complex, the brake pedal fell soft beneath my foot. No resistance, no control. I yanked the wheel hard, the world spinning sideways. My car careened off the shoulder, metal screeching against gravel, down into a shallow ditch. Everything went still. Blood buzzed in my ears. I coughed, tested my limbs. Bruised, sore, but alive. When I turned my head, I saw it. The SUV. Parked just beyond the ridge, and someone inside, watching. They didn't get out. They just waited. Then drove away. I crawled out of the ditch with gravel embedded in my palms and my right knee throbbing with every step. The car was totaled, tilted sideways like it had been placed there, not crashed. But I was alive, bruised, dirty, furious. I pulled my cracked phone from my coat pocket. The screen flickered but worked long enough to snap a blurry photo of the black SUV as it rolled back down the road. The plates were partially blocked, but I caught enough to know it wasn't a coincidence. That wasn't a random tale. It was a message. The cop who showed up an hour later asked if I'd hit a deer. Something like that, I said, teeth clenched. Swerved to avoid it. Lost control. He nodded, barely listening. Just another line in a report no one would read twice, but I knew better. That night, still smelling of gasoline and wet leaves, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open and my body wrapped in ice packs. I dug through the contents of the USB Silas had hidden in the locket. Deeper this time, I found a PDF labeled Drop Order, Silas. It was a legal document, nearly complete, a formal claim of misconduct and illegal human research activity tied directly to Grayson Innovations, with Vera Grayson listed as a senior organizational figure. My eyes scanned each line like they were written in fire. Then I reached the bottom. Status: withdrawn by party request. Silas never filed it. Or maybe he tried, and someone made sure he couldn't. I leaned back, mind buzzing. He had it all ready. He was going to expose them. But something, or someone, stopped him. This wasn't indecision. This was silence, enforced. I kept going. Buried in the same folder was a series of video recordings, board meetings, strategic planning sessions. Most were blurry, audio only. But one was perfectly clear. Vera stood in front of a whiteboard in a conference room, voice calm and confident. Subjects that resist must be neutralized, she said. Family is a risk factor. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. No stammering, no context, just fact. Family is a risk factor. She hadn't just turned her back on Silas, she'd helped bury him. I opened a new browser window and launched an encrypted cloud platform. Then I started uploading everything. Emails, scanned documents, video files, photos, copies of Silas's draft complaint, the fake autopsy, the footage of him with bruises that didn't come from a fall. I titled the folder The Archive and activated a timed release. If I didn't stop the countdown within 24 hours, it would go public. Social media, newsrooms, independent watchdog groups, everyone. I looked at Silas's watch on my wrist. The face was dark, but I whispered anyway. You're not going down alone. Neither is she. The next morning, I met with Rachel, an investigative journalist I knew through mutual friends. We sat in the back of a coffee shop, the kind where music plays too loud and no one asks for names. I slid her a burner USB. She scrolled through the files, her eyes sharpening as she read. Is this real? She asked, not looking up. If even half of it wasn't, I said. Do you think I'd risk my life over it? She exhaled slowly. You understand. This isn't a family feud. This is whistleblower level. Possibly federal. I know. She nodded, slid the USB into her coat, and stood. If this burns, it's going to be visible from orbit. I didn't smile. I couldn't. Not yet. That evening, I returned home and found the front door ajar. I froze. Furniture overturned. Drawers yanked out. Closet empty. My backup laptop smashed on the floor like someone wanted to make sure there were no second chances. But they missed something. The first USB, my original, was hidden in the air vent behind the sofa. I pulled it out, checked the contents, all intact. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number, I answered. A voice, low and distorted, filtered through static. You don't know who you're really dealing with. Then silence. The deputy left with a clipboard full of details that meant nothing. I filed the report with the vague explanation I'd rehearsed. Break-in, maybe a robbery, no suspects, no valuables taken. I didn't mention the USB drive or the missing laptop or the black SUV I'd watched disappear into the night. Some things weren't safe to write down. Within 2 hours, I was out of that apartment and parked in the gravel driveway of a friend's guest house outside Spokane. Nora had offered it once before, jokingly. In case you ever need to disappear without the drama. I never thought I'd actually take her up on it. That night, I slept with one eye open and a baseball bat beside the bed. The following morning, I got a call from an elder care lawyer named Gilbert Rollins. I'm calling regarding a codicil to Eunice Grayson's estate, he said. It was marked only to be opened in the event of endangerment. Your name was handwritten next to it. He met me at a coffee shop off the highway. When he handed me the envelope, his eyes lingered. Your grandmother seemed clear when she wrote this. I just wanted to say that. I nodded, thanked him, and opened the envelope in my car. The letter was written in shaky script, but the message was sharp as a blade. They used me. Silas was right. Vera is not alone. I sat frozen, the words ringing in my ears louder than any siren could have. Even now, even after death, she hadn't said this out loud. But she'd written it down. She'd known. And she was afraid. That night, I logged back into the property records system using a friend's login and pulled every record on the Grayson estate. Something jumped out. 2 years ago, my father, Thatcher Grayson, had his name removed from the title of the family home. No co-signature, no transaction history. Just removed. I hadn't seen him in years. Vera told everyone he was living out west, like he was off in exile by choice. But the documents suggested something else. I called an old neighbor of ours, someone who used to water the garden when we traveled. He left early one morning, she said. Didn't even say goodbye. Looked like a man who'd lost a war. I hired a private investigator the next day. 3 days later, he called me back with an address, a rural veterans clinic in northern Idaho. I drove alone. No calls. No music. Just the sound of tires over cracked pavement and the static of a growing truth. When I walked into the clinic, I asked for him by name. The receptionist blinked twice, like she hadn't heard it in a while, then pointed me to a bench outside. Thatcher Grayson looked older. Not just in years, but in posture, in resignation. When he saw me, he didn't speak right away, just gave a soft nod and motioned to sit. I didn't expect you, he said. Why did you leave? He exhaled, long and quiet. I knew what they were doing, what Vera was building. I tried to speak up once. She made sure no one listened. And I couldn't protect you both, so I left. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. This belonged to Silas. He gave it to me, told me not to open it unless someone came looking. I opened it before I reached the car. It was Silas's original will. Notarized but never filed. I wasn't surprised it named me as the sole heir of his non-corporate assets. Property, personal effects, legal documentation. What struck me was a line scribbled in the margin. If anyone deserves to outlive the lies, it's her. It didn't matter if the will was binding. It mattered that he'd trusted me. That even when the rest of the world tried to fold him into silence, he'd carved a path for me. Back at the guest house, I called Rachel, the journalist. No more delays. We're not waiting for threats. We go live tomorrow. She didn't hesitate. Send me everything. I spent the rest of the evening organizing files, audio clips, photos, and video segments into a single digital folder labeled Inheritance of Fire. Before logging off, I opened a blank document and started typing. Dear Vera, you'll finally hear me now, but not in the way you hoped, not in a whisper, not in a closed room where silence can't be questioned. You built a family on leverage and control. I built my truth on loss and proof. We'll see which holds. I hit save and closed the laptop. My phone buzzed. It was a breaking news alert. Leak of Grayson Corp internal files causes chaos. Whistleblower suspected. Attached was a photo. Of me. Taken from across the street. By morning, the world had changed. I sat cross-legged on the bed at Nora's guest house, staring at my phone as the screen flooded with alerts. The timed archive had released just past midnight. Within an hour, it hit the local feeds. By sunrise, it was national. Every corner of the internet was chewing it up and spitting it back out in hashtags and headlines. #Trust No One, #Echo Files, #Grayson. Cover up. The Grayson name was trending for the first time in years, and not for philanthropy or gala coverage. No, this time it was for buried autopsies, anonymous whistleblowers, shadow files, and a matriarch caught on camera stepping into her son's car just hours before he was found. Rachel sent me a clip. Local news. Evening segment. There she was, Vera, stepping from the curb, slipping into Silas's car. No hesitation, no visible tension. The timestamp at the corner read exactly 7:13 p.m. The official report said he died around midnight. The timeline collapsed on itself. Petitions followed, demands for internal investigations, former Grayson Innovations interns sharing anonymously. We saw the pressure, the secrecy. No one questioned Vera. And then came the second blow. The insurance documents leaked. Silas's policy had been altered, dramatically increased, just 2 days before he died. Signed off by Vera. The trail wasn't just financial, it was personal, strategic. She didn't kill him with her hands, I whispered to myself. She killed him with her pen. Everything spun faster after that. The board of Grayson Corps collapsed like dominoes. 3 members resigned in a single morning. One issued a vague apology on LinkedIn that was immediately torn apart in the comments. My cousins stopped answering texts. Aunt Linda blocked me on everything. Vera. She issued a statement through a lawyer, a 1-paragraph denial layered in PR gloss, claiming it was all an unfortunate misunderstanding manipulated by bitter family dynamics. She refused interviews, declined statements. Her silence didn't read as dignity, it reeked of guilt. I walked downtown that afternoon, coat zipped to my chin, earbuds in but no music playing. Just observing. People looked at me differently. Some smiled. Others stared longer than they should. A few crossed the street, unsure what to say. One message came through a blocked number. You don't know me, but thank you. I couldn't do what you did. But now they can't pretend anymore. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Later that week, I stood at a podium inside the modest meeting room of a nonprofit I'd just registered, the Grayson Initiative for Whistleblower Mental Health. Our mission was simple: make sure the next Silas wouldn't be alone, wouldn't be erased, wouldn't be exploited by the very people who claimed to love him. I looked out at a dozen faces, survivors, advocates, donors, people who understood. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about truth. And truth isn't a weapon, it's a release. They nodded. Some clapped. I thought of Silas then, his laugh, his certainty, his need to leave behind something better than silence. We had done that. That evening, as I sorted through mail back at the house, I noticed a crisp envelope embossed with a law firm's crest. Inside, legal jargon, polished and threatening. Notice of legal action, defamation, and breach of confidentiality. Filed on behalf of Vera Grayson. I folded it slowly, placed it on the kitchen counter, and looked out the window at the first flakes of snow beginning to fall over the hills. Then I smiled. Let's make this public, too. My lawyer called the following morning. His voice was calm, almost amused. This suit won't go anywhere, Milas. It's a bluff, a desperate one. I didn't need him to say it, but hearing it out loud let the last knot in my chest start to loosen. I thanked him and hung up without asking for updates. I didn't need them. The media had moved on. A few think pieces still floated around, debates about whistleblowing ethics, op-eds about betrayal from within, but the Grayson name no longer dominated the headlines. That silence was louder than any spotlight, and I welcomed it. I turned down every interview, offers from podcasts, panel discussions, even a documentary pitch. I said no to all of them. I'd already told the story that mattered. But something strange happened a week later. At a family funeral for a cousin I barely knew, I ran into my brother's son. He couldn't have been more than 6. Vera didn't attend. Unsurprising, but her daughter-in-law had come, dressed in black but scrolling her phone through the eulogy. As the service ended, I knelt down next to the boy, while everyone else filtered toward the cars. I saw Uncle Silas once, he whispered, barely audible. Mommy said don't tell. I blinked. Where? I asked gently. He shrugged. He waved at me. Then he turned and walked away, chasing after a red balloon that had come loose from one of the floral arrangements. I didn't follow him. I didn't press. That truth, whatever it was, would come when it was ready. Maybe it already had. Driving home, I let the boy's voice echo in my mind. Not with fear, but with clarity. Some truths don't come to break you. They come to free you, even if they arrive incomplete. I stopped trying to control everything that day. The fear, the what-ifs, the need to tie every thread into a neat explanation. Letting go felt like something new, not surrender, but space. A week later, I drove to Idaho. One more visit. My father was already on the porch when I arrived. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him. Weathered, yes, but not haunted. We didn't hug. That wasn't our style. But we sat side by side, two chairs rocking gently beneath a canopy of gold autumn leaves. "You know," he said after a long silence, "you're the version of us that we didn't dare become." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. We watched the trees sway for nearly an hour. That was enough. By winter, I'd moved to the Oregon coast, a modest cottage near Cannon Beach, teaching ethics part-time at a community college. The students called me Professor G. The nonprofit continued growing, slowly, steadily. Anonymous donations trickled in. Survivors found us. We offered them something no one ever gave Silas, a place to tell the truth without being told they were crazy. I stopped introducing myself as a Grayson. That name no longer meant anything to me. What mattered now was the work, the voice I'd reclaimed, and the people who reached out because someone finally had the courage to burn the archive. One windy evening, I sat by the shore with a notebook and pen. The letter I wrote wasn't meant to be sent. "Vera, you broke everything, and I survived all of it. That's your legacy, and mine. You built walls. I lit torches. Now people can see what you tried to bury, and you'll never be able to hide again. Malis." I folded the letter neatly, then set it aflame in a beach bonfire. The paper curled and blackened, but I didn't look away. I watched until the last ember turned to ash and drifted upward into the gray sky. Back home, just as I was about to settle into bed, my phone buzzed. One new message. No name, no sender. "You told the story, but not all of it. Be ready." I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked out the window, past the pine trees, and into the darkness beyond. "Maybe this story never ends," I whispered, "but I'm not afraid of its next chapter." The courthouse was colder than I remembered. High ceilings, pale walls, and rows of wooden benches that creaked beneath tension, not weight. I walked through the main doors like I'd done nothing wrong, because I hadn't, not a criminal, not a victim, not anymore. Inside, the gallery buzzed, reporters whispered names. Family I hadn't seen in months took seats near the back, eyes darting. Former Grayson Corp employees sat in clusters, pretending they didn't recognize each other. The walls were heavy with truth pressing in. I took my seat across from Vera. She didn't look shaken. Her hair was pulled tight, her jaw tighter. But her silence said more than any smile she could fake. She didn't speak when I sat. She didn't glance at me when my name was called, but the room shifted the moment I stood. "They thought silence was survival," I said, voice steady. "I made it public." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My lawyer stood beside me, presenting a formal countersuit, damages, abuse of power, emotional coercion, and obstruction of justice. The evidence we'd gathered unfolded on screen, redacted medical notes, encrypted boardroom audio, the video of Vera stepping into Silas's car, time-stamped and verified, the insurance document, the email threads, the voice memos, every word he'd left behind. Vera's attorney requested a delay, claimed the documents were misleading. The judge declined. I caught the faintest flinch from her. As court adjourned for the day, Vera stood. She didn't say a word, didn't offer a sound of defense, just looked at me for the first time since this all began. And then, she looked away. That was the verdict I needed. The next morning, I drove out to the cemetery. It was quiet. No ceremony this time. Just me, a filing envelope, and Silas's headstone still bearing that same empty phrase Vera had chosen months ago. I placed the envelope gently beneath the flowers. "You didn't die for nothing," I whispered. "You gave me the spine they tried to bend." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. My nephew, watching from the gravel path. He didn't speak, just nodded once, like he knew he wasn't supposed to be there, but also that he belonged. Back home, I typed a letter addressed to every Grayson Corp board member who had resigned in the wake of the leaks. You stood by and said nothing. That silence will follow you longer than my name. I signed it, not with my full title, but simply Malis. We filed the nonprofit registration update that week. The Grace and Truth Initiative, a place for truth, for voice, for anyone who had been made invisible. By spring, I was back in a classroom. Community college, introductory ethics. 10 students, most older than I expected. They listened. They asked better questions than I had answers for. On the first day, I opened with a line I hadn't planned. Family isn't who raised you. It's who protected you when raising you wasn't enough. No one asked me to explain. They didn't need to. That night, I returned to my cottage on the coast, brewed tea, and sorted through the last stack of forwarded mail. At the bottom of the pile, I found a small envelope. No return address, no postage stamp. Just my name, written in crooked cursive. Inside was a photo. Me and Silas. I was 8, he was 10. Both of us grinning, knees muddy, holding up a crooked cardboard sign that read, "Grayson Detectives, we see everything." I turned it over. On the back, a message in pen. "Keep going. It's not over. Not yet." I folded it carefully, tucked it into my coat pocket, and stepped outside. The fog rolled in thick over the water, curling around the cliffs like breath in slow prayer. I walked into it without looking back.